What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gage. Welcome to the channel. Today, I am excited to be going over the deck that I have been playing in the modern Yu-Gi-Oh format, and that is the Ice Barrier strategy. This is a very, very powerful and consistent deck that I have been able to steal wins from when I play against the modern decks, and I think that it's a strategy that if played very well, there are very few decks that can actually do something to combat its M board and its resilience. So before I go into the profile, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you're fans of content like this. And I'm just going to hop right into it. So, of course, we got to start off with the main deck here. And I, of course, have to go over the main starter of the deck, the Revealer of the Ice Barrier. Just a very, very strong starter. It has the ability where, the main ability where you can discard a card to essentially special summon an Ice Barrier directly from the deck. Very strong, gets the combo going, especially in tandem with the Mirror Mage, which you'll see in just a moment. The Mirror Mage actually triggers off of the discard from the Revealer, meaning that even if your Revealer ends up getting hit with a hand trap, if you did discard the Mirror Mage, you essentially end up getting the search to get whatever you want anyway. So yeah, Revealer is very powerful, and that's why you do have to play 3 copies. I'll go ahead and show the main combo on what you could do with Revealer towards the end of the video. And as I mentioned, we are playing 3 copies of Mirror Mage of the Ice Barrier. This has the ability where if it is sent to the graveyard, you can then add 1 Ice Barrier monster from the deck to your hand. And then the even more broken ability is that you contribute one other effect monster to special summon up to 3 Ice Barrier tokens to your side of the field. That makes it so that because he is a tuner, you are going to be able to go into some synchro plays with the different tokens that you get to your side of the field. So I also like playing 3 because aside from being a really good discard off of the Revealer, you can also just normal summon this, and because it triggers when it's sent to the graveyard, you can actually go into, worst case scenario, normal summon your Mirror Mage, link into an Almirage, and then trigger the Mirror Mage to go ahead and add an Ice Barrier card, which can be the Reborn if you need to grab it back, and then if you Reborn it, then you can go ahead and tribute the Almirage that you used to special summon him in the first place to then get your tokens and at least have a play. So Mirror Mage is a very strong card, specifically in tandem with other cards, and that's why I still think it's important to play at 3 copies. And I'm also playing 3 copies of Georgius. This guy is just a great extender for the strategy, level 6 tuner, so that helps you to get into some of your bigger synchro monsters. What's especially important, and all the most of the Ice Barriers, I should say, have a secondary kind of floodgate effect that prevents your opponent from being able to do certain things. Georgius is notable in that his ability specifically, if you control another Ice Barrier, locks your opponent from activating the effects of monsters in their graveyard, which is just absolutely insane to be able to essentially have lock off your opponent's graveyard in that way. It invalidates a lot of strategies, and that's why it's still, even just being able to end on him is still pretty strong in its own right, because if your opponent cannot play around that effect, then it means that you probably just end up stealing the game. But as I mentioned, just a great extender. When special summoned, you can go ahead and special summon an Ice Barrier from your hand or your graveyard. This one does specifically need to be a level 5 or lower, so, can't go crazy and, special summon, anything larger than that, but still very good nonetheless. And then another extender is Hexa, Spirit of the Ice Barrier, Speaker for the Ice Barrier, I should say. The speaker is really good in that it specials if you can itself if you control an ice barrier monster. And so if you have your revealer, for example, that usually means that you can normal the revealer, special the speaker, and then you automatically have a Bahamut Shark to go into a Totally Awesome, which is a very, very strong play. A lot of the times, if you don't have this in your hand, you can either search it off of the Mirror Mage and then, special it that way. So the Medallion also searches this. So there are many ways to be able to get into the speaker. And it does have a secondary effect in which if you control an ice barrier, you can banish this from the grave to special summon a token, which then you could use for a myriad of different things. A lot of the times I will end up using it just to end up synchro climbing, but there are times in which it could be randomly useful. For example, if you have a Qingying on your side of the field, you can then banish this from the graveyard to go ahead and trigger that Qingying's effect to banish a card that your opponent has, right? So there are other use cases for the speaker, but definitely just a very strong extender for the deck in general. And to round out some of the other ice barrier monsters, now we are talking about Hexa, just a cute little guy that is really is a starter on its own. Rather you'd rather special summon it off of the revealer, just because then you can trigger its effect to go ahead and send a level 3 or lower ice barrier from the deck to the graveyard, which most of the time the only relevant target there is going to be your Mirror Mage, which does trigger the Mirror Mage because it was sent to the graveyard. Doesn't care how it was sent there. So yeah, a lot of the times you really don't want to have to normal summon it, but if you have to, it can at least get your plays going, and I am a fan of being able to play as many starters as possible, coupled with hand traps to be able to, make sure that you can play the game, especially in today's meta. So I do recommend playing 3 copies of Hexa. I could totally see you running 2. Running 1 is a bit risky because then if it does end up in your hand, you can't special summon it off of something like the speaker, but you can still special it off of the Georgius. A lot of the cards really do, when it comes to playing this strategy, it really depends on how many of them you have in tandem with one another. And so sometimes you do have to freeform a lot of the plays based on, what you have access to. So I personally like, again, having as many starters as possible, and although he isn't the most ideal, he does get the job done. So 3 copy of Hexa has been working for me. And then the last main deck ice barrier, pretty much the only one that's relevant that you want to special summon off of your Lancia, is going to be the Broken General Raiho of the ice barrier. Very debilitating floodgate effect, having the effect where it says when an effect resolves that was activated by your opponent's effect monster is on their field, they could discard a card, otherwise their effect is negated. What that means is that basically your opponent can't use their effect monsters on the field. If they do, they have to discard, which is fine because that means that you are whittling down their resources in a fairly substantial way, because a lot of the times they might not want or can't afford to discard those cards that are in their hand. So General Raiho is just insane. Worst case, even if you do end up drawing it, thankfully Lancia does have the ability to special from the hand, deck, or graveyard, right? So it does suck to draw. This is one of the few bricks that the deck does have, but it is so powerful that you do have to run it. So I definitely recommend playing at least the 1 copy to special off the Lancia. And for other extenders, not an ice barrier, but might as well be an honorary run, it is the Ice Jade Azurine. This one allows you to essentially discard another water monster to be able to special summon this card, and then you could special summon an Ice Jade token that's a level 3. So essentially, this is a 1-card Synchro 10, which means that, of course, it helps you to pretty much get immediate Lancia access. If you discard the Mirror Mage, it does also trigger off of the Ice Jade, discarding it. So yeah, overall, you want to be able to play as many extenders as possible, just in case you do end up getting hit with a hand trap of sorts. And this card just being a essentially a 1-card Synchro 10 is too powerful not to play in this strategy. So I definitely recommend maxing out and having 3 copies. Now on for the spells, I am playing 3 copies of Medallion of the Ice Barrier. Pretty straightforward. This is the main searcher for the archetype with no restrictions. Add an Ice Barrier from the deck to the hand. That's literally any of your Ice Barrier monsters, and it's not once per turn. So this is a mandatory 3 of for sure, and you're going to want to max out on all of your consistency for sure. I'm also playing 1 copy of Foolish Burial, 1 Freezing Chains, 1 Called by the Grave. The Foolish Burial, pretty self-explanatory. You send the Mirror Mage, you essentially get access to your combo. The Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier is that Reborn that I was discussing earlier. When it's activated, you could target a level 4 or lower Ice Barrier monster in your grave and special summon it. So when you go ahead and, say if you did normal summon that a Mirror Mage, and then link it off for the All Mirage, a lot of the times I'll go ahead and search for this if I do not have it already, so that I can go ahead and revive the Mirror Mage and then go ahead and continue comboing from there. And then, of course, Called by the Grave, just a very powerful one of being able to stop your opponent's hand traps. You really don't want to just auto-lose to something like a Dimension Shifter. But, of course, it's also just good at being able to disrupt your opponent's plays, too, sometimes. So, if your opponent is playing Yubel, for example, right, and they try to, negate one of your monster effects with Phantom, sometimes Called by is able to eat those, right? So, yeah, just really good one-ofs in the deck, and I definitely highly recommend playing all 3. All right, and I'm also playing 3 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. This is not only a card that allows you to continue playing if you are interrupted by a hand trap in any way, but is also one of the best cards to be able to help you play if you do just so happen to go second. If you're forced to play into a board, Talent can sometimes be the difference maker in being able to either steal one of your opponent's monsters, or even just helping you to, if you do end up getting interrupted on trying to break into a board, sometimes drawing those extra cards can help get you there. So I do think that this is mandatory for the deck, just because you really don't want to get caught with your pants down. This deck is very good at going first, but can struggle going second, and I just think that this card is just the most versatile to be able to play for if you're going first or second. And then I'm also playing, of course, 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. One of the main combos is that you are going to be able to draw into many cards into your deck, and you essentially want to be maxing out on all of the best hand traps that you can potentially draw into to give you the best chance of being able to solidify a very, very strong board backed up with hand traps in your hand. So Imperm, it's good if you're going first or going second. So yeah, it's going to continue to be one of the most powerful staples in the modern Yu-Gi-Oh format for sure. So definitely play 3 copies of those. And of course, the other modern usual suspects, the 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, obviously one of the most versatile hand traps in the format. Can't get caught playing without it. 3 copies of Effect Veiler. Again, you really want to max out on being able to draw as many hand traps as possible to help stave your opponent, keep them at bay, and increase the likelihood that you will be able to play on your following turn. And of course, 3 copies of Nibiru. Alone, against certain meta decks, they are able to play around it, but in tandem with something like a Effect Veiler or an Infinite Impermanence, a lot of the times can be used to break any board, regardless of whether or not they are able to establish a negate before their 5th summon. So yeah, that's 40 cards right there. As I mentioned, this is, a very powerful deck. You can afford, to play a lot of non-engine with the hand traps, just because you do just so happen to have a lot of starters. And if you do go off, then there is a high likelihood that you are going to be able to win. So I'm going to go ahead and start going through the extra deck now. One of the reasons that this deck is a lot better than it is in Master Duel is because we have access to Totally Awesome. As I mentioned, Revealer with the speaker makes the Bahamut Shark very easy to be able to get to that, so that you can establish Toad and have a negate on your 5th summon to be able to make sure that you can insulate and create your board without having to worry about getting hit with the Space Rock. So yeah, this is fantastic that the deck has this play at its disposal. It's still strong even if it doesn't have this, because you could always just go into Lancia on your 5th summon, and even if you do get hit with Nibiru, you're at least going to be able to Trish them as a reward. But I do want to try as much as I can to ensure that I can go ahead and establish the Totally Awesome beforehand, just to make my board that much stronger and resilient. As I mentioned, playing one copy of Lancia, Ancestral Dragon of the Ice Mountain. This is what makes the deck insane, honestly. It has a myriad of different effects, one of the biggest ones being the once per chain. If your opponent special summons a monster, except during the damage step, which is important to note, you can special summon an Ice Barrier from your hand, deck, extra deck, or graveyard, and then you can change one attack position monster that your opponent controls to defense position. This is insane. The fact that it's once per chain, you could do it up to twice per turn. So a lot of the times I like to go for General Ryo first, so that, if my, say my opponent special summons a monster and that monster has an effect that's on summon, you could go ahead and special summon the General Raiho, and then because the Raiho is on the field upon resolution of your opponent's monster activating their effect that was special summoned, they will be forced to discard, even though they activated the effect before the Raiho was actually on the field, which is just not fair in the slightest. And then, of course, that's just one summon. So if your opponent continues to try to push into your board by special summoning even more, you can go ahead and bring out something like the Georgius after that, which then locks down their graveyard. So now they don't have, they can't activate monster effects in the graveyard. They can't, if they try to utilize monster effects on the field, they're going to have to continue to discard cards from their hand. And as you can see, it becomes a very nasty lock at a certain point where your opponent realizes that there really isn't much that they can do, because even if they manage to be able to play through all of that, if they remove the Lancia in any way, it they banish it, they tribute it off because of a kaiju, or they destroy it with Raigeki, whatever the case may be, you can then synchro summon essentially one of the Ice Barrier Synchro monsters from your extra deck, which is just insane, meaning that you have the ability to Synchro Summon into Trishula, if this is removed, to banish a card from their grave, hand, and their field, which is just mind-boggling. Because you can banish up to one card from each of those areas, it means that your opponent does not necessarily have to have a card in each of those areas in order for you to be able to gain this effect. So even if they just have no cards in the field or in the graveyard, you can still go ahead and rip a card out of your opponent's hand. So and of course, another target that you can special summon, that you can synchro summon from the Lancia, is also just an insane card on its own right, and that is Trishula, Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier. This one simply says, when it's synchro summoned, banish up to 3 cards your opponent controls. So if it just so happens that your opponent committed a little bit more into the board rather than, say their graveyard or their hand, you could just go ahead and hit them with this instead. And it's non-target banishment, which is just absurd. Because that means that now you can play around cards that might have targeting protection, and it does force your opponent into a predicament where if they don't have an answer, they are going to lose some pretty important pieces on their board. Most of the time, if they end up getting hit with this, it's game over. What's pretty wild about this is that if this just so happens to be destroyed by your opponent's card, you can then special summon a Trishula from the extra deck or the graveyard, and its attack then becomes 3,300, and then you can have the attack of any face-up monsters your opponent currently controls and negate their effects. I mean, the deck just continues to put your opponent in precarious situations that force them to be able to answer your board in very, very specific ways. So that is why I just really love playing this deck, because honestly, Lancia is just a house. He's also 3,300 attack. I mean, there are not many things you have to be able to special summon monsters to be able to get to the point where you could just straight up attack into him. If your opponent tries to pull out even some of the strongest Bestials, I mean, they're not attacking over the Lancia, and if they did, the ability for it to change their position to defense position is just brutal, because even if they were able to special summon into something that was strong enough to attack into it, you could just put it into defense position. So yeah, that's the deck is very powerful, and this is the backbone of the strategy for sure. However, there are other synchro monsters at your disposal, Coral Dragon being a very strong one. Usually this is going to be one of your combo pieces to be able to continue to synchro climb into your larger synchro monsters and then get access to the free draw. And sometimes the pop does come up if you just so happen to be playing into a board. I am also playing a few level 8s, so I'm playing the White Aura Whale as well as the Dragite. These are just good at being able to, the White Aura Whale being able to essentially clear your opponent's attack position monsters. It destroys all of your opponent's attack position monsters when it's synchro summoned. And then the Dragite being a good option if you just so happen to be going first, so that you can go ahead and establish a negate because it is a water monster. So just very solid synchro 8s that you can go into. And then for some of the other Synchro 10s, we also have, as I alluded to earlier, a Chen-Ying as well as a Gamir Azurine. Very strong cards, very strong options. Usually Lancia is going to be your go-to, but there are going to be times in which you are able to establish multiple Synchro 10s on your turn, and it really just depends on the flavor. Usually I like to go into, if I have a Lancia, I like to, and I'm going first, I like to have it backed up with the Ice Jade Synchro, just because it means that I will then be able to protect it from being able to, my Synchro monsters from being destroyed by mass removal, such as Lightning Storm, Raigeki, Dark Hole, etc., because this does provide protection against those types of effects. And if I'm playing into a board, I like to go into the Chen-Ying, because I am doing banishing on my end, and so I can, start to pick apart my opponent's field if I have Chen-Ying. And he's also just sticky because he has the protection effect as well. So very strong options to consider. And then the Synchro 9 for the main combo that does allow you to go ahead and draw a ton of cards. The Crocodragon, it just so happens to be a very powerful card for this strategy in particular, because of the fact that if it's synchro summoned, you could draw cards equal to the number of non-tuners used specifically for it. So as I mentioned earlier, there are your Mirror Mage, because you are special summoning so many of those tokens, and they are not tuners themselves. Usually you're going to end up using a bunch of those to go ahead and synchro summon into him. And so I believe the max that you can draw off of it can be a draw 4 if you draw the 3 off of his effect, as well as the draw from the Coral Dragon. So being able to draw 4 cards is just absurd, because you could either use those cards to then be a quick effect pop to any of your opponent's cards on the field, or you could just simply draw into a bunch of hand traps and then just use those hand traps. So Crocodragon is one of the main combo pieces that you're going to want to make sure you're playing in the deck. If you go uninterrupted, this combo is essentially spells game for your opponent. And as I mentioned earlier, we are playing the Almirage worst case scenario. If you only have access to the Mirror Mage, having this is just an option that allows you to continue to play the game. I'm also playing a few Link 2s as well, the Coral Anemone and the SP Little Knight. Again, there's just going to be some instances in which maybe you just need to clear some space on the field, and going into Coral Anemone just being a solid extender, being able to special summon a water monster with 1500 attack or less from the graveyard. And then just SP being SP, very solid. If you are not locked into waters, which not all of your effects lock you into water effects, there are going to be times in which you are able to go into a monster like SP Little Knight, just being able to on-summon banish, and if your opponent activates a monster effect, being able to banish again as well. So just solid Link 2s. You don't necessarily just want to be locked into options for synchro summoning. Sometimes you're going to want to Link summon too. And then last but not least is Underworld Goddess. The biggest issue with the deck by far is that we can't out towers monsters. I mean, that's, if your opponent is sticking a monster that's unaffected by card effects, then having all of those options, whether you're banishing, whether you are popping cards on the field, none of it matters if their monster is unaffected. So there are niche instances in which that happens, but I personally never want to be caught in a situation where that happens, and I do not have an option, and Underworld Goddess just so happens to be the best option for doing so. So guys, that's the extra deck. I'm going to quickly go over the side deck. As everyone knows, this is pretty dependent on the format that you're playing, but I always just play really solid options. I'm playing 3 copies of Droll Lockbird. You see your opponent is playing a deck that's adding a lot of cards. You immediately throw this in. 3 copies of Artifact Lancia. This is to prepare myself for the Malice matchup. And there's a lot of other very niche matchups in which Lancia can also be pretty useful, but Lancia is just going to be a powerhouse in this format in particular, especially if Malice ends up being as popular as I anticipate. I'm also playing 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. This is good against Yubel, it's good against Tenpai, so you, of course, want to be able to make sure that you at least have the option in your extra. I'm playing 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. This allows me to essentially have an option for if I am playing into a board. The deck can be pretty frail unless you see a very specific combination of starters and extenders, just like many other decks out there. So having Droplet as kind of a contingency to be able to side into when going second to help ensure that you have a higher likelihood of surviving is just an option that you is going to be very strong regardless of the format. And then, last but not least, 3 copies of Crossout Designator. As you can see, I am playing a ton of hand traps and have a bunch of hand traps in the side deck. So I personally do not want to, get hit with a lot of those hand traps. Some of the hand traps can be devastating if they know how to be able to target the right one. So Crossout as an option to side into when you know that you are going first in the second or third game, for example, is something that you want to make sure that you have at your disposal. So guys, I'm just going to go ahead and quickly go over the that main combo that I was discussing with the Revealer. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and normal summon the Revealer. I'm going to activate its effect. You're going to go ahead and just discard whatever card is in your hand. As I mentioned, the combo is even more powerful if you are able to banish something, discard a Mirror Mage, for example. However, it's perfectly okay if you don't have it. You could just discard whatever you want. So let's just assume we're just discarding a blank so that we could go ahead and special summon a Hexa, Spirit of the Ice Barrier here. We can then activate the Hexa's effect to go ahead and send a level 3 or lower. So this is where, no matter what, we're going to be able to get access to our Mirror Mage search. So we're going to use the Hexa to go ahead and send that Mirror Mage. I'm going to go ahead and actually increase the field here just so I have even more room to be able to go over this combo. So yeah, that works just fine. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and send the Mirror Mage, and the Mirror Mage is going to send a copy of the is going to add a copy of Speaker. You can then go ahead and special summon the Speaker because you control an Ice Barrier, and then I'm sure you saw this coming. You could go ahead and special summon your Totally Awesome by special summoning the Bahamut Shark and discarding the Speaker. Next, you still have 2 monsters at your disposal with the Bahamut Shark and the Hexa, so this is an instance in which you can use both of those to go ahead and link summon into a Coral Anemone. The Coral Anemone can go ahead and special summon a monster from the grave. That's going to be, of course, your Mirror Mage. Your Mirror Mage can now use its effect to tribute a monster, so that can go ahead and tribute your Coral Anemone, and that is going to get you 3 tokens. So we'll just go ahead and put 3 cards over here. Yep. So now, once you have your tokens, you could go ahead and because you special summon 3 tokens, it gains 3 levels. So now you are a level 5. So you could go ahead and use the Mirror Mage as well as one of the tokens to go ahead and special summon from the extra deck your copy of Coral Dragon, as I mentioned earlier. Just very good bridge for helping to continue to synchro climb. One of the things you're going to want to do at this point is you did have, I ended up using it as a token, but you had a speaker in the graveyard. You could go ahead and, let's just use this as a token instead. Let's go ahead and banish that speaker because you do control ice barriers with these tokens in play. And if you control an ice barrier, you can banish it to essentially special summon another token to your side of the field. So now that you have 6, 7, 8, and 9, you could go ahead and use your Coral Dragon and all of those different tokens to special summon the Croca Dragon from the extra deck. I usually special summon it in defense position. From here, the Croca Dragon will be Chain Link 1, and the Coral Dragon that was sent to the that was used for the Synchro Summon will be Chain Link 2. And because you used 3 non-tuners for his summon, that will be drawing 3 and drawing an additional card for a total of drawing 4 cards from the top of your deck. So with just 1 revealer, you now have, aside from the other 4 starting cards in your hand, you have an additional 4 cards, which are most likely going to be hand traps. And you're ending your field with a totally awesome as well as a Croca Dragon. If you just so happen to draw into the Ice Jade Synchro, for example, which in 8 cards is a high likelihood, you can actually go ahead and, special summon that to end up ending with, having a Lancia on your side of the field as well, which is just an incredibly powerful board. If your opponent special summons, that means now, oh, great, you special summoned? Cool, I'm going to go ahead and special summon a General Ryo, and now you have a mini Floodgate effect. You have 4 extra cards in your hand. I mean, I think that the board speaks for itself, and the fact that you could do that with just 1 copy of the Revealer just goes to show how powerful the deck can be. So guys, if you're sticking around until this point, you're a real one. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps out the small guys, the small creators, keeps me motivated to want to continue to make content like this. And until next time,